let's close it and voila! Hello and welcome to another NihongoGamer video. Today I'm going to be doing exactly what I did in a previous video, which is drawing new artwork for my Mad Catz TE2 Plus arcade stick. If you saw the previous video, I actually went through, did the sketch, line work, and speed painted the color, and showed that in a previous video, and it looked a lot like this. I was very happy with the results, so happy in fact, that I thought I would draw another one. So today I'm going to be using my Mobile Studio Pro. This is my Windows computer that I use for drawing in Clip Studio Paint. It also allows me to screen record at the same time. It has a pen, which I use for drawing digitally on here. I've decided, since I used Sakura as my character for the arcade stick the first time, I've decided to go for another very much loved character. It's going to be Karin. Alright, so just like with Sakura, I wanted to use a pose that the character actually uses, so an actual fighting move from the game. And this is a move that Karin, the character, does, where she does a couple punches and then she spins around and hits the opponent with her back. So this is a legitimate move from the game, and I'm using her default costume because I think this is quite iconic for Karin. This is kind of the look that I associate with this character. Now, I'm just putting the eyes in because I've said this before. If the character doesn't have eyes, I kind of get demotivated and not really sure whether I'm going to finish the drawing or not. So I always have to get the eyes in done as soon as possible. And I'm going to put some hair down as well. But of course, before going and doing all these details, I did the main pose, so I had to make sure that the whole pose was going to fit. Something that works really well with this pose is the fact that she's kind of curved around in a C shape, and that works perfectly for the fact that I'm using her on this arcade stick. One, because she rolls all the way around, curves around the arcade stick itself. But secondly, it keeps her head nice and tall, because there are some moves where the characters duck down, but any moves where the characters duck down on the ground means that their face is probably going to be covered by the gamer's palm over the arcade stick. And so I wanted to make sure that her face was high and it was still a move that curves around the joystick. Now, Karin's hair is actually quite difficult to draw because she's got ringlets, so I had to kind of figure out how to draw ringlets. I wasn't even really sure how the ringlets attach to her head. She actually has ringlets coming down from her hair, but also a couple braids that go around the side that hold it all in place. Now, also, Karin wears these really awesome red boots, but I can't imagine how uncomfortable it is to actually fight in heeled boots because you obviously are limited in the number of positions you can stand in. But anyway, it makes her look really awesome with this cool white stripe on the boot. Okay, one thing I had in mind when I was drawing this as well is I wanted to make sure that her feet were kind of on a straight line, so it's almost like she's standing on the edge of the artwork, so her feet were kind of right there, standing on that line at the bottom. Now, this was particularly difficult, and I ended up drawing it again later. I ended up changing it after I painted it. Not only are they difficult to draw from the side, but when they're facing you, I had almost no idea what ruffles look like when they're facing you. So that was a real challenge, but I ended up changing them after painting it. Another thing I did was I go in and I do shading before I do the line work, because I want to get a good idea of how much balance there is of light areas and dark areas. So even though it's not color yet, I just wanted to get a general idea of how much light and how much dark there was in this image. And I was quite happy with the balance of it, so then it was time to move on to the line work. Alright, so I've changed the line work to pink just so that it's a little easier to see because I'm going to be doing the line work in black over the top of it. Changed down the opacity, and right now you'll see again, I'm running in and I'm drawing the eyes, but in fact I'm actually going to erase those eyes later because I'm going to be doing that purely with paint. I wasn't going to have the actual black line work on top of it. But I always like to have the eyes done nice and early just so that I have a general feeling of the aura that the character has going on. And also, again, it's the motivation thing. So I've finished doing the line work for the eyes, but I will be erasing them later on. The really nice thing about a character with great hair like this is that you can use the hair to increase the sense of movement in the picture. Because in fact, at this point in the move, she is standing still, but because she has got so much impact in her back when she hits the enemy, it really helps to have the hair flying in the opposite direction, or at least lifting up in the air to show a sense of impact. Now, Karin's got a really great default costume, but I'm really happy that Capcom went and put the nostalgia costume, so the costume that she was wearing in the Street Fighter Alpha games. But this is a very similar one. It's just a slightly more grown-up look, seeing as she's kind of moved on. She's now in charge of her family's money and all that, so she's got a slightly more business-like attire. Drawing these long curvy lines is always a really nerve-wracking bit, because one straight line is really obvious when the quality of the line isn't very good, so you have to be really careful and draw that line nice and slowly. And that's pretty much it for the line work. So time for the speed paint, and we're going to put in the skin color, and this always happens to me. I always get the skin tone not quite right, so I always end up changing the color of the entire layer until it's an actual nice healthy skin tone, and then I go in and I put the red for the coloring of her top and, well, it's kind of the red jacket and the skirt that matches it. Love the color scheme on Karin with that super saturated red, but also the accent color of that blue on the bow. And in fact, just the fact that she's blonde also really balances out the fact that that is a really strong, bold red coloring scheme. Something about the fact that it's got that one single white stripe here and there. It's all about bold statements and accents with Karin. So finally erasing the original eyes that I drew and going in with the straight base color and then the darker color on top of that, giving her a nice solid dark iris in the middle. It always helps to have a nice dark outline around the iris as well, and then of course that highlight, which just brings the character to life, because there's something about characters that don't have a highlight which makes them really look dead. And I think if you're familiar with a lot of anime, there's always characters that go a little bit crazy, and when they do, you'll see that the highlight will disappear from their eyes. So the highlight's a really important part of bringing the character to life. So Karin, just like Sakura, also has this weird kind of neckerchief thing going on, and I thought I'd stick with nice soft shading because I think that gives you a sense of the material that the clothing is made of. And since the material for the neckerchief is clearly meant to be soft, I thought I'd stick with some mainly soft shadows on that one. Alright, so this is the part where I decided to go back and change the wrist, because it wasn't very clear where the elbow was, and in fact I couldn't really tell that that was just the sleeve of her jacket. It just looked like this weird white flower that was kind of coming out of her hands. But I've decided to redraw this whole thing, have the white be a little bit more clear that those are sleeves, and I've had her elbow come a little further out to the side, because if you can see a little bit of it, it kind of gives you better clues as to what position her arm is in. And last but not least, just throw enough highlights on there that it really brings the whole thing to life. And then to top it all off, I got a nice simple background with the red and the white gradient, just like on the Sakura image, but just for a little change, decided to put a small black shadow in the corners, and hopefully that helps prevent her feet from just blurring into the red, because actually when I tried it with pure red in the corners only, her feet just kind of disappeared into the void. So I thought it would be nice to have her feet kind of stand out a bit by having a little black here on the corners. And that's pretty much it. I'm really proud of the results, so it's time to go and print it. Alright, I'm back from the print shop, and I've just made 2 copies of the Karin image, but I'm quite happy with the way that it turned out. Went for a very similar background, seeing as it worked quite well on the Sakura version. If you see on the Sakura version, I had a red background which seemed to blend in quite nicely with this panel border. Let's go ahead and cut it out. Alright, before we begin, we're going to have to take the stick off so that we can take the acrylic off, and we use this as a stencil again for the image, which we're going to cut out the holes for. So let's get this acrylic off first. So I'll take the panel off, but before we take the acrylic off, we need to take the arcade stick off itself. So I'll put these three things in here for safe keeping. Also, thank you very much for the tip, whoever it is who left it in the comments. I took your advice and I cut the holes smaller and I put the artwork beneath the buttons. So I had to take the buttons out and then slide them back in. So I'm gonna have to take these buttons off first. Alright, so we need to take the cables off these buttons. Got to do it quite carefully because I don't want to break this. I don't have a replacement for it yet. Alright, that's all of the cables disconnected. Don't worry, there is a color guide down here that shows me which color needs to go into which button, but for now, let's take these buttons off by pushing on these little clips here. And now that the buttons are off, I can actually take the artwork off, and this is the new artwork going on. Let's cut the holes. Now, the other thing to remember is that for the joystick, there is going to be this black washer, and this actually is going to sit roughly here. So I need to have this in a position where it doesn't really get in the way of the dress. Let's put some sellotape down and keep it in place. Also got my handy cutter knife. Remember, kids, if you're handling sharp objects, speak to someone that isn't me. If I close this up, it's going to sit on here. Already looks quite nice, but the first thing we need to do is stick the buttons on. Let's get these all hooked back up. This is going to be a little bit of a time-consuming process, so I'll speed this up. Okay, so I'm going to close this and put this on. Attach the ball top back on like so. And the last thing to do is to put this red panel on, which is going to involve a few screws. Let's close it and voila! The Karin edition of the Mad Catz TE2 Plus arcade stick. Wow, I'm 100% happy with the way that's turned out. Looks like she's standing right on the red frame. I've managed to this time dodge the black area here that surrounds the joystick. Obviously, if you move it over. Oh wow, even if you move it over, it doesn't really cover the actual skirt part of her outfit. But wow, I'm 100% happy with the way that works. Alright, well there you have it. That is the completed version of the arcade stick. I'm very happy with the way it's turned out. Even having this black area in the corners, I think that actually is a nice touch compared to the Sakura version that I drew before, which doesn't have the black areas in the corners. It's a subtle difference, but essentially the same background. Can't wait to use this arcade stick and actually play a bit of Street Fighter V. Hope you've enjoyed watching me go through the process of the sketching line art and the painting of this one. If you're interested to see more, do let me know in the comments. I'm not sure if I'm doing commissions now. It basically depends on how much time I have in and out of hospital and all that, but I'm very much hoping that either soon or, you know, in the near future to be able to do some commissions for people who want to have their own custom character, maybe their favorite character or an original character of theirs. If I do decide to do commissions for these arcade stick custom artworks, then I will let you know on Twitter. Probably it will be pinned up there at the top. Hopefully I'll be able to write how much it costs and how many if I can actually manage to do, because obviously I'm one person that can only do so many in a day. Well, actually you probably only do one a day. But yeah, so that's all. Hope you've enjoyed this NihongoGamer video. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, share the links and all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Yeah.